Warning, here's what every back pain sufferer needs to know about the pelvis. Hi, I'm Jason Barlow, RMT, and I'm here today as your therapist and coach to help you transform your stress, your tension, your pain into health, happiness, and vitality. As a massage therapist, I deal with at least, I would say even more, 70 to 80% of my patients that come in want their lower back treated for pain or tension or some accumulation of stress. A close second to this would be neck tension, probably another 25%. And then 5% of my remaining time, it's a mishmash of different scenarios, from the wrists and forearms to the lower extremities. But principally, my bulk of work is orientated around dealing with low back pain. Today, I'm going to plunge into what you as a back pain sufferer need to know about the pelvis. So the pelvis is made up of two coxal bones or hip bones. These two frames basically integrate together here at the front, called the symphysis pubis. There's a ligament here. And then on the posterior side, it attaches with the sacrum, which is the base of the spine, and the tailbone below that is the coccyx. The sacrum, coccyx at the base, and then as we travel north on the spine, we have the lumbar vertebrae. Now, most people's problems are orientated around this region when it comes to lower back. That is the lumbar spine and the pelvis. And this particular joint here, which is the attachment between the coxal bone and the sacrum, is called the SI joint. Now, what's unique about the pelvis is that it has multiple directions of movement. We can get our anterior tilt, which is a tipping forward of the pelvis. We can also get a posterior tilt, which is a tipping backwards of the pelvis. We can also have a hip hike one way and a hip hike the other way. We also get what we call in flare and out flare. Now, this particular model is not allowing me to do it, but essentially what that means is that one side of the coxal bone or hip bone has the ability of flare in or turn inward, or flare out or turn outward. Now, these could be marginal differences between the right and the left side, but if you can imagine all of those small incremental differences between the left and the right side, because they're two independent bones, can create chronic types of pelvic coupled with lower back type of stress, tension, and pain. We've got to remember that the pelvis is very much the center point of our body. We have lots of muscular attachments occurring and arising through, in, and around the pelvis. Just think of all those different movements that we just described. All those different movements require muscles to create those movements. Now, the pelvis can be a different size relative to males, females. They can be different sizes within each of those gender types too. Generally speaking, the female pelvis is designed to be able to bear a child. And so the pelvis is typically broader and more accommodating in the birth canal to permit the birth of a child at that stage of life. It's also a center point of some of the largest ligaments in the body, particularly on the posterior side in this region between the sacrum and the coxal or hip bones. Now, if you've been listening to me the last few weeks, I talk about two particular causes of injury. One is trauma. Trauma where we slip, we bang, we fall, we bump, we may be involved in a motor vehicle accident, sporting injury, and so forth. So there's a blunt force that arises that causes trauma to the local tissues and maybe some repercussions up the chain. The second is what we class as a slow motion injury. Now, this is, for me, as a clinician for over 18 years in this field, probably the biggest cause of most of the injuries, stress, tension, and pain that I see in my clinic, because it's our daily habitual postural habits or patterns that are giving rise to a chronic effect that maybe it doesn't even show itself for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or longer, because it's taken that long for all these imbalances to arise. And then one day you go to bend over, pick up your shoe, pick up a piece of paper, lift your knee to get into the truck or mount a horse. And these are real life situations. I'm thinking of examples for you where suddenly pain manifests. It's not that was the particular cause of your pain. What was the cause was years worth of accumulation of imbalance and immobility. So centering in on the pelvis today, those are the two areas I wanted to concentrate. Was number one, the imbalanced effects of the pelvis, and number two, the immobility. Now, the imbalance, what am I referring to there? So with my training, I've actually learned how to assess for a structural or functional leg length difference. What that means is that when it comes to the femur and the tibia, so that's your thigh and your lower leg, there can actually be a structural difference in the bone size on one side relative to the other. And this can show itself, for example, if you're wearing trousers and you find that one side of the trousers is wearing more, that can be an indication of a leg length difference that, you may want to go get that further evaluated. It can also show itself with chronic occurrences of low back, pelvic, or hip related pain. This is definitely something you want to have further assessment toward so that we can understand whether it is structural or functional. Very quickly, structural is literally one side, either the femur or the tibia, is anatomically shorter relative to the other side. The intervention in that situation is first and foremost getting a pelvic x-ray and measuring that discrepancy, and secondly, having a lift placed either inside or outside the shoe to raise the short side and equalize the position and alignment of the pelvis. There is also what we call a functional leg length difference, which is typically the muscles in the lower back that are actually shorter and tighter on one side, making the hip hike on the one side, making it look as though the legs are actually short, long relative to each other. So we have a functional, we have a structural. It's important, especially if anybody's struggling with chronic pain, to have those evaluated and understand the differences between the two. So the pelvis can then alter its alignment according to those leg length discrepancies. The pelvis can also alter its alignment relative to favoring one side of the body more than another. Think of a new mom, or even a mom that's got a 2 or 3 year old. It's usually when the baby's getting heavier and toddler ages, that as the mom over years has been tilting the pelvis to prop the baby child onto the hip on the one side, what happens is it creates an imbalance in the alignment of the pelvis. And then all those years of doing that has created tension on one side more than the other, which alters then the position of the spine. We can get what we call a scoliosis, which is a twisting or side bending of the spinal column itself. So the pelvis has got to be evaluated. There's several things that can arise by way of imbalance, but we have to identify what those imbalances are in order to help mitigate the stress and tension and pain that can be happening higher up as a consequence of those misalignments in the pelvis. The second part there was immobility. So very commonly, I would say males more than females from my experience, the pelvis is typically lacking mobility or full range of motion. A lot of guys tend to sit flat into a chair. They put a wallet in one side of the back pocket, which alters the position of the pelvis and it flattens the spine. And as a result of this, the pelvis gets very used to going into what we call a posterior tilt. A posterior tilt, like this. And as a result, this is the front of the body here. And as a result of that posterior tilt, what happens then is the spine, in the lumbar section especially, goes very flat. And as it goes flat, instead of having this natural inward curve, that creates wear and tear on the joints, on the discs between those bones, and all the soft tissues and ligaments that are connecting in and around that region too. So we have to encourage on a daily basis, ideally, more range of motion in the pelvis, especially if you're more of a desk jockey or you have a large commute getting to and from work. That large window of time when your pelvis is immobile or fixed in certain postures and positions, but is lacking that additional range of motion, you're essentially creating every day what I label in my new book, the 15-Step Playbook for Pain Relief, postural debt. We all have it. We all have to make time to make sure we're clearing that debt just as soon as we can, as much as we can. Deposit into that account every day. Keep paying in. The way that we pay in, we do it with 5 steps that I'm showing you here. Number 1, move. Number 2, massage. Number 3, mobilize. Number 4, stretch. And number 5, strengthen. That's how we surround our physical body with the best gateway forward for helping reduce that stress, that tension, and pain. The purpose of today's video is to demonstrate and show you. The link below actually gives you a more extensive version of how to mobilize the pelvis. We have to take some time to get that pelvis to have its full and complete range of motion, because again, if you don't use it, you will lose it. Thank you for joining me today. I highly recommend go to the description below. You'll see a link there which will share with you the educational or instructional video of how to mobilize your pelvis. And we want to do this fairly routinely because, again, if we don't use it, we will lose it. Also, I recommend go to my website, jasonbarlowrmt.com. From there, you will find my free digital copy you can download of my book, the 15-Step Playbook for Pain Relief. Just leave me your email and I'll fire that off to you right away. If you prefer to have the physical copy of the book like this, it's short, it's condensed. I give you my top 15 steps for helping you transform your stress, your tension, and pain, and to get more health, happiness, and vitality and have more expression of that on a daily basis. So go to my website for that. If you want to go to my YouTube channel, the link for today's instructional video is below. Otherwise, it's popped up here on the screen for you. It's youtube.com/Jason Barlow RMT. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've got some benefit from that. And remember, your muscle health is my #1 priority. Thank you.